Welcome to the 21st century, where we have more of everything we need to make our lives longer, brighter and bolder than ever before. And this will only get better, but not without the most vital and civilizing commodity on Earth: energy. Some people say our insatiable appetite for energy will destroy the world. Rubbish. We're never going to give it up, and we can't get enough of the stuff. In fact, we need more. Much more. So, here's the big idea. I want enough energy to satisfy the world's appetite, not just for the next 50, 100 or even 200 years. I want it never to run out. Not easy, but fortunately, there are people all over the planet with ideas that might just make it happen. One or two are quite brilliant. So let me just put this very simply. You're making petrol out of exhaust by adding sunlight. Right. While others are rather maverick.
There we go! Whoa! Godspeed, space elevator. I love that.
Or possibly just a little fanciful.
We need 100,000 of those kites.
That's all of Europe powered with kites.
Yeah.
Not sure I quite believe it. Some of the stuff that's going on out there defies belief, imagination, possibly even common sense, but it is all part of a deadly serious attempt to change the way the world works. So, bring it on. Let's start by looking directly into the sun. After all, what's it ever done for us, apart from dividing the night from the day and being a bit fundamental to life on Earth? Is that it? Or could it do something really useful? That is a solar-powered car. A racing car, in fact, that will do 125 kilometres an hour, or 80 miles an hour in the proper money. Now, you're not going to win a Grand Prix with that, obviously, but it's not bad for something that runs entirely on the power of sunlight. And these students who built it, they're from the University College of London, have just driven it almost 2,000 miles from Darwin to Adelaide across the baking desert of Australia. This will be good then. We're preparing for a high-stakes experiment.
My voice goes all funny inside here, can you tell?
That will push the car to its very limits.
Why is it going backwards?
But before that, I have to master the controls.
Oh, the turning circle's absolutely hopeless.
I intend to drive this solar-powered vehicle not in the sun-drenched Australian outback,
Forwards.
but here on a ropey old airfield in Guildford.
Now, as you've probably worked out, we're actually driving at the moment just on the battery power because the bodywork isn't on, so the solar cells aren't connected. Now, I realise that there is something slightly preposterous about doing this in England on a very grey, overcast day, and when the whole concept of solar power is completely academic. But there is a point to it, because what we're going to do is demonstrate just how much power the sun can give us using this solar-powered car. And to do that, and this is going to sound ridiculous, I know, we're going to wait until it's dark.
Correct. We'll drive in the dead of night. If you've ever doubted how much power comes from the sun, watch what happens when we take it away.
Is it dark yet?
Now, this has never been tried before, driving a solar-powered car in the dark using artificial light in place of the sun. If we could just have the lights on, please. Now, I'll be driving the car, and on my cue, we will gradually increase the amount of light like this, and the car will get more light into its solar cells, more electricity will be generated, and the car will go faster. It's really very simple, in theory. Thank you. Okay. James is ready. Okay, and action. Right, I have a reading 0.2 amps. It's going. That's amazing.
I'm assured there are 402 solar cells on the car, and they convert around 20% of that light into electricity. That's about twice as good as your desktop calculator, should you ever want to drive one.
I have reached a speed of about 1.2 miles an hour, but I'm still accelerating. Right, I'm ready for more light, cue. Oh, yes. Four and a bit, 2.6 miles per hour. Accelerating very slightly, I might get 5 kilometers an hour. There it is, 5.5 kilometers an hour. This is like driving a missile.
I said that just to flatter the students. It's actually more like a flat milk float. So, time for a bit more light.
Ready for more light? Cue light! Wow, that is blinding. And I can't see out of the windscreen. And my face is now melting. That's 18 kilowatts of light focused through this curved windscreen onto my eyeball.
The interior is not well ventilated, and yes, I'll probably never see again, but so what? Here at last is that white heat of technology.
I'm going for 10 miles an hour. It's very close. The wheels of the trucks carrying the lights are a blur. There it is, 10 miles an hour from light bulbs. That is absolutely remarkable. It proves that in future, if local councils make the street lighting stupidly and dangerously bright, we can all drive around for free.
So, what can we deduce from this highly sophisticated and groundbreaking experiment?
Well, I saw 10 miles per hour on the speedo of the car, and to achieve that we had to use all those lamps, which amount to about 18 kilowatts worth. That's enough to light the streets of a small village. And yet that car will do 80 miles per hour using just the light from the sun, even though the sun is 92 million miles away. So that would suggest that there really is a great deal of power to be harnessed from up there. Well, not now, because it's night time, but tomorrow, maybe.
So, the question is, how do we get the energy of our sun to shine out of our main sockets and into every kettle and toaster in the world? The answer may well lie here, on the dusty plains of southern Spain, known for its sherry, fighting bulls, and now this.
What I'm actually driving towards is a solar tower. And if you believe all the PR hype, it is the latest success story for solar thermal energy. That will generate about 11 megawatts, and that's enough to power 6,000 Spanish homes. It's a bit of a landmark in its own right, really, and a lot more attractive than your typical coal-fired power station. This is more like a modern cathedral for the worship of a forgotten deity. That's really pretentious, isn't it? Can you cut that out?
The French dabbled with solar towers in the 1970s. The Americans have been toying with them for over a decade. But let's be honest, who'd have thought it would be Spain, a nation still regarded by many as unfinished, that would get theirs up and running first? And here it is, a fully operational solar tower of power.
So, how does it actually work? Well, this is simply a very large mirror. It's 1,291 square feet in area, or in Napoleon, about 120 square meters. It is actually made up of 28 separate mirror panels bolted together. So, if you broke the whole thing, that would be 196 years of bad luck. And there are over 600 of these arrays spread all around this field.
I said that these are simply mirrors, but they are in fact heliostats. Loosely translated, that means they track the sun's position during the day, sort of sucking light out of the sky and throwing it towards the tower.
It's a very big tower. It's about 40 stories or 377 feet. That's approximately 115 metres in Roman Catholic. And I'm not terribly good at heights, really, to be honest. But it's okay, because I'm going to protect myself from the adverse effects of vertigo and the risk of falling on my head with this fashionable sun hat. Just for you viewers, I'm going to climb the tower.
Again, I'm suffering horribly here to bring you a greater understanding of this latest scientific wonder.
Now from up here I can see 624 of those heliostats, each one reflecting the sun to the receiver, which is up above me. And that means that the sunlight up there is 624 times as intense as it is down at ground level. And it means that the temperature is 400 degrees C. And that is why, sadly, they're not going to allow me to go up to the next stage, because the instant I walked out there, I'd be burnt to a crisp before I could say anything constructive, which would be amusing, I'm sure, but we haven't finished the rest of the programme yet. Anyway, I think I'll leave you to enjoy the view here.
As mystical as the receiver looks, it's actually just a bit of fancy plumbing. A series of water pipes which produce steam so hot it could put a crease in the trousers of every Spanish waiter this side of Barcelona.
This slightly dreary prefab is in fact solar mission control. Now, the movement of the heliostats throughout the day is all automatic. It's governed by a big, powerful computer. But in here, they can make very, very fine adjustments. He's got a map of the whole field of heliostats, and you can just sit there and manipulate it to wring absolutely the most energy out of the sun. And from here, they can even tell if one of the heliostats becomes a bit dirty. Now, if it just has the slightest layer of dust on it, its efficiency is reduced by 10%, which they regard as very significant.
Dust is a surprisingly low-tech Achilles heel for such a high-tech power station. But being able to power a small town is pretty impressive. So much so that the plan is to extend this solar empire by building a new tower 150 feet taller than the present one.
These blokes, for example, say that with this extension that they're building over here, this plant will be able to supply the whole of Seville. And more to the point, 10% of the Earth's surface is desert, and it's not really good for much apart from maybe a remake of Lawrence of Arabia. So why don't we fill them with mirrors and towers? The area of the Sahara Desert could supply the whole of Europe with electricity. But there is a flaw. This would work much better if there was a place where the sun always shone. And there is.
It isn't here. This is a rain-sodden suburb of Washington, D.C., but it may be the start of something. Because, believe it or not, this is where a group of scientists are taking the first steps towards building a power station where the sun does always shine. In space. Which, as we all know, is quite a long way up.
The obvious way to send stuff up into space is with a rocket. Here's one, it's a Delta. But there is a bit of an issue with it because 90% of the weight of that at takeoff is made up of the fuel and all the rockety stuff that you need to get it up there in the first place, which means the payload, the bit up on the top, is very small. Now that's fine if you're just going to launch something like a satellite, but if you want to take up a load of materials and East European builders, then it's not really good enough and very expensive. Fortunately, though, rockets are seen as rather old hat these days. In the future, if we want to go into space, apparently we'll just go in the lift. Or the elevator.
Yes, that's the idea. We are going to go into space in a so-called space elevator. It will scuttle up and down a very strong tether stretching over 20,000 miles to a platform in space. The ideal place to build our solar power station, because at that height the station can happily rotate in a geostationary orbit, and it's where the weather, frankly, doesn't exist.
The idea of a space elevator isn't actually that new. As long ago as 1895, a Russian scientist, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, looked at the Eiffel Tower and thought, that's not really big enough. And he redesigned it so that it stretched like a stairway to heaven, all the way from the Earth's surface, 20,000 miles into space. Now, I know this all sounds fantastically fanciful, but it is being taken extremely seriously by the highest strata of space power, i.e. NASA, who have actually said they will award a prize of $2 million to whichever group comes up with the most viable concept for a space elevator. And that is exactly why I'm here in Maryland, on a very unassuming industrial estate, because it's here that I will meet the group who say they have the best chance of winning the pot. And they are in here. That is right. The space community has called on the services of history's great problem solvers, men in sheds.
And leading this group of space pioneers are Bert and Steve.
Now, before you get too excited about all this, I should point out that it is still very much at the prototype stage. In fact, it is, to be honest, only a model. What's this?
This is just like you said, a very simple prototype. What we're looking to do here is just scale a rope.
But I could have done this with my Meccano set. Erector, as you would call it.
Well, don't tell anybody that. We should also point out that we're very bright scientists. We spend hours researching the proper pulley system to use. For instance, this particular pulley is from a sliding glass door. This pulley right here is from a rollerblade wheel. Without the education background that we have, somebody like you may not be able to do this.
Really?
Yeah.
Does it work?
Oh, yes, of course.
Have you got a space tether we can send it up?
We have some that looks like a space tether.
A little more tension, Bert. Okay, that's good.
Look, there's a man standing on one end of the space tether to give it the right... Right, this is fantastic. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
You ready to let her rip?
Yeah.
Catch the cow!
Do you honestly think that you'll win $2 million from NASA?
Are you kidding me? Did you see how
with
fast that thing went?
Hey, it carried a heavy payload and went fast.
So there we have it.
Right. Now, two things strike me. One is it's broken, and the other is you can't send your elevator into space powered by batteries. They won't last long enough.
That's true, no. So we have a solar-powered climber.
Well, another different climber.
Oh, yeah, different climber. I think this one's done.
Well,
Yeah,
that's fortunate, as it happens.
yeah,
Can I see it?
absolutely.
Where is it?
This way.
Right. Where's the bin? No, here it is.
I'm rather sceptical that the world's energy crisis will be solved by bits of washing machine climbing up a piece of string. But I'm about to be put right by another space cadet.
This is Matt.
James. Hello.
Nice to meet you.
And this is Space Elevator Mark II.
Yes, indeed. We've got a set of photovoltaic cells here which collect energy from light.
Solar panels, that is.
Yes, the same thing you might find on your roof.
And this mechanism is the same as the broken Mark I
Yes,
space
yes.
elevator, in essence. And it's powered by sunshine?
Can be, but the sun isn't that powerful and isn't always available. So we're going to be using a laser for the actual competition.
Yeah. And where's the laser?
The laser is unfortunately not that portable. So for the time being, we're making do with a searchlight.
Right, so the cable that's going to go up on the crane represents the space elevator tether.
Yes.
This is the space elevator, and the searchlight represents the laser beam that in the real one will be providing the
solar power bit
You've got
on the photovoltaic cells. Has this ever been done before?
No, this is our first time with the climber, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, that's fantastic. We like a good experiment, and we're British, and we admire your optimism. Anyway, I'll leave you to get on with it.
All right.
I know it's very hard to believe, but these chaps really are in with a chance of winning that $2 million prize, because Bert there has been working for a major aerospace contractor for the past 20 years, and Steve also has been working there for the best part of a decade. And Matt, the man with the space elevator in his hand, he has been a government scientist for almost 10 years. So what you're actually seeing here, despite appearances and surroundings, is some of America's greatest brains at work. Only a moment ago, Matt, for example, said, have we checked that when we run this thing, it's going to go up and not down? That's how good this is.
Careful of the solar arrays there.
Yeah.
Don't touch there. Hold it under. Yeah, hold it there. Yeah, excellent.
I think we're ready, yes?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Go.
Right, cue the light, please. I'm actually very excited. Let's go.
There we go.
Whoa!
Yes.
Godspeed, space elevator.
Yeah, it's a matter of
Look at that,
targeting.
look at that. Oh, I love that.
That is fantastic.
It's fantastic.
All right.
Good
Very,
job.
very good.
Good job, Bert. Good job, Matt.
Nice work.
Thank you.
Nice work,
Thank you.
Bert.
Thank you.
Sir, I have to admit, I didn't believe it. Once again, you proved that men in sheds rule the world. That's fantastic. Well, how about that then? Of the 22,000 miles that the space elevator has to cover, it's travelled the first 125 feet. Now, I know that doesn't sound very good, but consider this. You'd think nothing of getting on an aeroplane and travelling all the way to Australia. And do you know how long the first powered flight was by the Wright brothers in 1903? 125 feet. So there you have it.
Well, okay, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself. There are a few problems to iron out with the elevator, not least of which is making a tether strong enough to stretch out into space. So let's take a step back. Where did our insatiable hunger for more and more energy come from? Well, that would be the Industrial Revolution. In the Industrial Revolution, life expectancy exploded. The world changed, and most importantly, for the first time, we felt we had access to a seemingly inexhaustible supply of power. Steam. Hey. Once we'd seen the power of power, everything about life improved, and everyone had shoes.
Very dignified way to drive around with this pleasant chuffing noise behind you.
The age of consumerism had begun, making us eager for more and more energy. In fact, in the last 10 years alone, the amount of global energy consumed has risen by a massive 25%. But I think there's a problem here. We might think we're all very sophisticated and clever, but it's all actually very primitive. Because most of our energy is coming from coal, oil and gas. So all we're really doing is digging stuff up from the ground and burning it. It's hardly very 21st century for most of our energy to be the result of setting fire to plants and animals that died millions of years ago. And that's before you consider the other problems with fossil fuels, not least of which is being held hostage by dodgy sheikhs and dislikable Texans. Isn't it time for a bit of innovation? Let's forget oil and gas and turn to something else like hydrogen? Now, we've been riding traditional petrol-powered motorcycles like this for generations.
But now, apparently, there is a new way of doing all this, and here it is. It's the ENV, or the ENVI.
It's an electric motorbike.
This electric motorcycle has its own onboard electricity generating station in the form of a hydrogen fuel cell in here. And in very, very basic terms, it mixes the fuel on board the bike, hydrogen, with oxygen, which is in the atmosphere, in the fuel cell to make electricity on demand for the electric motor down there, and it drives the wheel in the conventional manner. I'm going to take this for a spin, but first, I need some friends. Because motorcyclists are pack animals and require a leader, electric or not. Gentlemen, start your engines. While they're making lots of noise, I'm not even sure mine's going. It makes less noise than the wind. This is biking, but not as we know it. For a start, there's no reassuring throb between my legs. With my mates well ahead of me, I'm a lone wolf, as if born to be mild. 2 wheels, the open road, but only 8 horsepower. I sort of like it though. It's quite serene. It's quite spaceshipy. The great thing about the fuel cell is that it never runs down. As long as you keep feeding it with hydrogen, it will keep making electricity pretty much forever. But that does lead to a problem, because so far there is no hydrogen infrastructure to speak of. All of this stuff in all of these pumps is completely useless to me. But having said all that, there is something that this fuel cell can be used for, and it's something you can't do with the engine of a normal motorcycle. Have a look at this. That pod is a self-contained electricity generating station. You can slot it into this bike, you can slot it into a specially designed car. I could even take it home and use it to power my toaster. Even the legendary Honda Cub can't do that. It all appears shiny and modern, but there is a catch. Because hydrogen by itself is not freely available, it has to be extracted, and that takes, well, energy. And at the moment, that energy is coming from those pesky fossil fuels. So, it's time for another rethink. The solar tower I saw in Spain was a step in the right direction. If the Spanish can exploit their great natural resource, the sun, what have we Brits got? Now, as we know, 2/3 of the world is covered with water, and wherever you get water, you get tides. And we always will get tides, as long as the Earth goes round and there is a moon up in the sky. In some places, the tide merely dribbles in and out in a rather lacklustre way, but in other places, such as here, Strangford Lough in Northern Ireland, it belts in and out. And that is why this sleepy-looking American tourist attraction, to be honest, is actually at the cutting edge of tidal power technology. The great thing about tidal power compared with the more familiar forms of alternative energy is this. If you have a wind farm or a solar panel array, you are completely at the mercy and whim of the weather, but the tide is completely and utterly predictable. In fact, tides are so dependable that it's possible to calculate exactly what they will be doing 200 years into the future. Which is why this chap here in bright yellow, Peter Frankel, has a vision of harnessing that power with this great big thing sticking out of the sea. It's a tidal turbine. It was installed here in 2007, having been built by the shipyard that built the Titanic. Thankfully though, this thing is designed to be sunk. So why is it here and not, say, down there?
Well, we had to find a place which was exactly the right depth and with really strong currents.
And this bit of the, what is this, an inlet?
It's called the Narrows because it's between a much larger stretch of water, the Strangford Lough, and the sea. The lack of space, the water speeds up to go through.
So this is like pinching the end of the hose pipe?
Exactly, yes.
What Peter has sort of done is taken a windmill, turned it upside down and shoved it headfirst into the sea. Tides rush past the blades, turning them and driving a generator. Very nice, if a bit invisible, but fear not, because at the flick of a switch, Peter can raise his monster up from the deep. All very James Bond. Well, more John Wyndham, actually.
God, it's getting really strong, isn't it? That's fantastic. Now, at its maximum speed, the tide here moves at about 11 miles an hour, which doesn't sound particularly fast, but you have to remember it's a huge, huge mass of water, 700 times as dense as air. And in fact, when the tide's going that way, if I fell off this ladder, I'd be in the Irish Sea in less than 10 minutes. That's absolutely vast.
To be honest, it's chuffing freezing up here and very blowy. So if you don't mind, I'll just rattle off the facts as quick as I can.
When this thing is fully submerged, the tips of these blades are about 5 meters below the surface of the water. Their total diameter is 16 meters, and when the tide is at full speed, they'll be rotating at about 10 RPM. I'm finding all this really quite exciting, to be honest, and I'm forgetting what a Burke I look in this outfit. Each blade has to withstand a load of about 40 tons at full tide, and you can reverse them, of course, for when the tide starts going in the opposite direction. What would be really funny would be if the boat with the camera crew in it disappeared and left me here, so that as this went down, I was lost at sea. No, that was just a joke. You can come back to the ladder. Oi!
These underwater turbines can produce enough power for a small town, like this one, for instance. But there is more to the sea than just tides, because wherever you find sea, you will probably also find waves. There is enough energy in the waves upon the sea, theoretically, to meet the entire planet's energy needs. It's a simple matter of getting hold of it. When they told me I had to go and investigate wave technology, I assumed I'd end up somewhere really miserable, like Hawaii. But no, turns out that the really important stuff is being done here. This is Edinburgh. Which is where it all began, back in the 1970s, with one man, Professor Stephen Salter, sent on a mission by a higher power.
Well, my wife asked me to do something about the energy problem, and she specified very clearly what she wanted. This is always a very helpful thing to do. What she said, she wanted a source of a large amount of energy, which was going to last forever, and was going to be clean, and was going to work in the winter in Scotland.
With such clear instructions, Salter got to work and invented the duck. Not these, but these. His ducks sat across the path of the waves, drawing the energy from the incoming rough seas to leave the water as smooth as glass behind. It was brilliant, or it would have been if a government report hadn't screwed up its sums.
And the latest calculations show wave energy electricity could be 10 times more expensive than nuclear or coal power stations.
The calculations were, in fact, rubbish, but the report sealed the duck's fate, and the project died a premature death. But that wasn't quite the end of wave power, because the duck then evolved into a sea snake. And that's where this bloke, Richard Yen, comes in. This photograph was actually taken in the 90s when he was hard at work in the wave tank, perfecting his brainchild. And such is this man's dedication, he's still here, look. And that red thing bobbing about is his snake. Going for this picture I have of you, which was taken 10 years ago, and you do still have the same shirt and trousers on, I'm sorry to have to say. Has this been 10 years of work?
The actual creation of the idea was really the work of a weekend. It was a bit kind of Wallace and Gromit. I vanished into the workshop to create the first model.
So you must have had a fairly unpromising weekend lined up if you decided to spend it all in this cold bath.
Yeah, I think I was skint actually. I think the option of going to the pub was not there.
So how is the snake related to the duck? That's a novel question.
We've taken all of the volume of the duck and we've stretched it out into a pencil-like form. The machine is made of some long, thin tubes with some little short power tubes between them. In each of the little short tubes, we have hydraulic cylinders which absorb the power from the motion, which is then converted into electricity by a hydraulic motor.
So the waves roll, the snaky thing wriggles about, and the wriggling makes electricity.
That's absolutely the case.
Simplifying it. Richard Snake has made it out of the baby pool. As a fully functioning prototype, it's 120 metres long and weighs in at a hefty 700 tonnes. It's not plugged in yet, but once it is, it'll mean that Salter's mission will finally have been accomplished. So far, there's no shortage of intriguing ideas when it comes to harnessing sources of energy, ones that don't require a shovel, a pickaxe or a drill. I've seen how it's possible to capture the power of the sun and the sea. But what about the wind? Well, for that, there's only one thing for it: a weekend in Amsterdam. If there's a nation that understands the power of the wind, it's the Dutch. Holland, after all, is the home of the windmill. And there's one there, look. As you can see, they have wholeheartedly embraced the modern equivalent, the wind turbine. I'm not exactly sure that they're going to inspire a new school of Dutch masters, but it must be acknowledged that they are about 40 times as efficient as those old ones. Trouble is, relying on the wind for energy means relying on a force that actually isn't that reliable. Because even here, in gloriously flat Holland, the strength of the wind only generates a meaningful amount of electricity about 25% or so of the time. And the problem is actually the height of the windmills. They tend to stick up anywhere between 80 and 200 feet into the air, but in fact, to work their best, they should really be about 25,000 feet off the ground. Let me explain. It all began in late 1944, when some rather fiendish bomb-laden balloons started appearing over the west coast of America. No one believed it at the time, but they had actually come all the way from Japan. The Japanese had discovered the jet stream, a high-speed, high-altitude wind that circled the planet.
The balloon unit has a paper gas bag, 64 rope shrouds about 40 feet long, and an automatic ballasting and firing control.
It was a desperately cunning device. An altimeter kept the balloon in the jet stream by releasing sandbags if it dropped too low. Tragically, the bomb balloons did kill 6 people, a preacher's wife and 5 Sunday school children. But the power of the high-altitude jet stream had been exploited for the first time. The reason I've come to Holland is that the Dutch are finally ready to shake off the centuries-old stigma of the windmill and instead attempt to harness the energy of the high-altitude winds. And a lot of this is down to the work of that man, Wubbo Ockels. He is a professor, he's a physicist, he's a pilot, and he's an astronaut. He was the first Dutchman in space. He really was. There he is, look. But most importantly of all, he's a kite enthusiast. Yes, this clever fellow has ditched his spaceship and his moustache and, daft as it sounds, plans to harness the phenomenal power of the jet stream using kites. Nice.
It's accelerated. Now it's getting powered.
We're talking high-tech computer-controlled kites made of Kevlar and nylon and a high-tensile steel cable. What gave you the idea for the kites thing?
A long time ago, you know, as a child, I had a kite, and you want to get it higher, and so you just roll out the line, and it wanted to hold it in my hand, and I let it go a little bit, and then I couldn't stop it anymore, and it burned my finger, you know, it was really, really hurt. And you realize how much energy is in a kite. It's amazing.
Well, how high do you think you could go? Are you, this
with one kite, we will go just a few hundred meters.
Right.
And it goes up and up and up. But the trick is that we can control this kite. This is not a dumb kite, this is a smart kite, which is controlled here by these fellows with these joysticks and also with the computer. And then we can make a kite fly basically like an airplane. And so what we do is we go up like a kite, and we come down like an airplane. So it pulls strong when it goes up and generates energy, and it doesn't really use energy when it comes down, and so it repeats, and that's the way we can get energy.
Whilst these kites are doing well, they're just proving the concept, because for his next trick, Wubo intends to send them into the upper atmosphere.
It's quite a far-fetched idea when you're just used to flying kites at the seaside. The kite would go up to high altitude, you're saying maybe 9 or 10 kilometres. So it's in the jet stream, or the beginnings of the jet stream. It flies up, pulls the cable, turns the drum, makes the electricity, then it will glide back down, then it will pull again, and you'll have a whole series of kites working synchronised so that you've got constant supply.
That's the end idea. But those winds don't go everywhere. They go predominantly over England and over the Netherlands and over Denmark. So we have a luxury. We have more wind than the rest of the world.
So we're wind-rich in this
We are wind-rich, yes. You could even imagine that in some future, you know, we next to the OPEC countries, which will be outdated then, will have WEPEC countries, you know, wind energy producing and exporting countries.
So can you put a figure on how much power there is in the wind?
If you want to understand here, you know, above the atmosphere, how much energy is available, then what you can do is you can hold your hand, and then with my eyeball, I kind of see a cone of air above there. The amount of power in that cone of air is the same as what the whole Netherlands is using.
So, I mean, just in that bit of sky there, I'm probably getting most of Europe sorted, am I? There you go. Do
we need just a few more hands and we have whole Europe.
Greece. Germans need quite a lot because they're extravagant. But that's still only that bit of sky, and that's all of Europe powered with kites.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I quite believe it. I know this all sounds terribly far-fetched, but I think that might be because in our minds we associate brightly coloured kites with the seaside and Winnie the Pooh and Mary Poppins and all that sort of thing. But once you start to look at the physics and the arithmetic of it, it makes a great deal of sense. I mean, if you have a certain amount of air moving at a certain speed and filling a certain size kite, then that will generate that much energy that can be turned into electricity. These are physical absolutes. And I'm beginning to feel that these sort of new age energy people actually have a point. Nature has given us a gift here. It gives us the wind blowing and the sun shining, and they've been doing that for millions and millions of years. And what have we done with them so far? Used them for holidays. That's about it.
The trouble with all these renewable resources is that they're stuck with the stigma of alternative energy, which sounds really wet. And the thing is, it's not alternative. It's just plain energy. The only alternative part is the sort of imagination it takes to harness it. But there is another source of energy available. It may not be as attractive as kites, but it's certainly hard to ignore. The power that hardly dares speak its name, nuclear. Now, as we all know, everything is made up of atoms, and if you split the atom, it releases energy, and plenty of it. That's nuclear fission. It's what gave us Hiroshima, and Sellafield, and 3 Mile Island, and Chernobyl. Nuclear fission has had its moments, but there is another way. Nuclear fusion. Not splitting atoms apart, but forcing them together to liberate even more energy. True, that reaction was responsible for the biggest explosion ever made, the 50-megaton Russian Tsar bomber. But even so, it still represents the best chance we have of getting nuclear energy without the fallout. To make it work, all you need is a bit of hydrogen. Nuclear fusion could be a truly remarkable source of energy. It's much more powerful than fission, but because the only waste product is helium, it's completely clean. It almost sounds too good to be true. And to be honest, it almost is, because it's bloody difficult to manage. For a start, to make the hydrogen atoms fuse, you need them at the temperature that you'd find at the center of the sun. You need to keep them at that temperature, and then you need to manage the way they move around. It's not easy. But here at the JET Laboratory in Oxford, they are trying to make it work by building something called a tokamak, which is basically a huge hollow ring donut lined with magnets. With the tokamak, it is possible to heat hydrogen to 100 million degrees, at which point it becomes a plasma, a gas with special properties that encourage the hydrogen atoms to fuse together, make helium, and release their lost mass in the form of energy. The trick is to maintain those ludicrously high temperatures long enough to keep the fusion reaction going. And to make sure that happens, nothing can touch the plasma. 100 million degrees is quite toasty, and that's where the magnets come in, because their fields control and contain the plasma so that it never actually comes into contact with the surfaces of the tokamak. Well, that's the basic idea, but to be honest, controlling fusion is pretty darn complicated. So to pull the whole thing together, you need lots and lots of brains. Fortunately, Shakib here has enough for the two of us. What is all this stuff? I mean, I've never seen this many computers apart from in a bank.
Well, what you see up here on this screen here is the main parameters of the experiments that we're running from here. So, for example, this shows you the power required to raise the temperature of the fuel to the kinds of temperature where fusion starts to happen. These traces are, for example, the magnetic field that was produced in the previous pulse, temperature and density, that sort of thing. Of the plasma.
But there's no actual way of seeing what's going on. You can only look at computer data. That seems.
Well, we have some live feeds. We have a camera here, which is a visible light camera, and that looks through a window actually into the machine.
But just to make this clear, this is an actual image of what's happening. It's not a computer representation.
It's a live image.
And how big an area are we going to be looking at? The whole cross-section?
We're going to be looking at a cross-section, yeah.
3, 2, 1.
What's that?
That's just a siren that goes around the whole site to alert everyone that a pulse is running through. There you go.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's looking into the chamber.
Is that the actual pulse?
Yeah, that's the light coming from the plasma. Now we're putting the high power heat in, and that's when the temperature really goes up. And you see these little white flashes?
Yeah.
Those are neutrons from fusion. Then you're actually seeing.
What, you can actually see them?
Yeah. You're actually looking at nuclear fusion taking place.
So I saw a neutron?
That's right. You saw a neutron from nuclear fusion.
Wow, that's fabulous. At the moment, the fusion doesn't last very long, and the neutrons only appear for a fraction of a second. So, here they are again. Blink, and you'll miss them. That was sort of strangely beautiful. Even?
It is very beautiful.
You've seen it lots of times, haven't you?
It is very beautiful, yes.
I can go down the pub and say, I've watched some nuclear fusion. It's a bit like people saying, I saw a microwave in the kitchen, but that's rubbish, but this is true.
Yes, absolutely.
A very clever physicist once pointed out that nuclear fusion is like trying to put the sun in a box, because nuclear fusion is exactly how the sun works and what keeps it burning. He also pointed out, rather annoyingly, that the real problem was how to make the box. Now, I know it may not have looked like much to the naked eye, but what we've just seen here at JET, that little purple flash indicating that fusion had taken place, means that finally we might just have the box. Fusion strikes me as a pretty good idea. Of course, they'll have to make it work for more than 30 seconds if it's to catch on. Now, from everything I've seen, there's no escaping the fact that there is loads of energy out there. And I get the feeling a lot of it is within our grasp.
God, it's getting really strong, isn't it? That's fantastic.
It's really quite inspiring to see so many people with the determination to make even the most unlikely ideas into a reality of some sort.
Good job!
Very good.
Good job, Bert!
And you know, I'm always tempted to get involved myself, though of course I'd need a much bigger shed. But what about my more pressing needs? Has anyone thought of a new way to fill my car with petrol? Well, believe it or not, someone has. The New Mexico desert is legendary for mind-bending goings-on. The atom bomb, Roswell, and peyote, to name a few. But it's now home to something every bit as strange. A particularly potent brew of New Age moonshine.
Here in Albuquerque, cutting-edge research has reverted to a sort of alchemy with a group of American scientists who claim they can make something like petrol out of nothing more than thin air, or more specifically one part of thin air, CO2, and water.
Making petrol synthetically isn't a new idea. It's just always been cheaper to drill oil out of the ground and then refine it. But that may all be about to change, thanks to this bunch of freewheelers.
Now, that man with the ponytail is Rich, and the other man who has a beard is Nate. So obviously they're hippies first and foremost. They're also scientists and quite possibly magicians, because they say they have woven a spell that conjures fuel out of nothing more than thin air. Now, my scientific knowledge is not great, but I know that that sounds like something for nothing, and that's not allowed. Still, they say they're going to show me how it's done. Hello?
Oh, hi.
Rich?
Pleased
James.
to meet you.
How are
James.
you? Nate?
And this is Nate.
How are you? Now, petrol out of thin air. I'm a bit cynical. What's it about?
Well, the first thing you've got to do is get the building blocks. That's carbon monoxide and hydrogen from carbon dioxide and water.
Sorry, carbon monoxide and hydrogen, that's what you use to make petrol.
That's right.
And you get that from carbon dioxide and water.
Correct.
Right. Is it difficult?
It's very difficult.
Chemistry is my weakest science. You're going to have to,
okay,
you know, treat me like a bit of a half-wit here.
To split carbon dioxide, for example, takes very high temperatures. You need something on the order of 2,400 degrees centigrade to
2,400?
To heat it up to before it wants to break apart.
2,400 is, I think, about twice the melting point of mild steel, isn't it?
Yes, it's quite hot.
How do you, can you make that hot?
Well, we can do that in our solar furnace.
So I'm guessing that this Hall of Mirrors thing is the solar furnace?
Yes, this is where we can achieve 2,400 centigrade.
The solar furnace simply uses mirrors to concentrate sunlight and reach those incredibly high temperatures.
Now, to illustrate how useful 2,400 degrees is, and to bring this back down to earth, I'm going to use it to cook this traditional American lunchtime hot dog snack on the end of a very long stick. Here we go.
There you go. Oh yeah, that's got it.
Good God. That's frazzled. It's not medium rare, that one, I'm afraid. It's even worse than the ones that were on sale in the Odeon in Rotherham in 1974. It's quite hot as well.
Yeah.
Can you de-dog my stick for me? Have you got another one?
I don't usually get asked to do that very often.
What else can we do with this?
We can melt some steel to illustrate the real high temperature capabilities. Yeah, sure.
Let's do it.
All right.
Burning a hot dog is child's play. For steel, Rich and Nate have to fine-tune their machine. What you're seeing is a piece of steel being melted by the sun. There's more than enough heat here to knock the chemicals needed to make petrol into shape.
I think I'm going to make an effort to learn more about chemistry when I get home.
Yeah,
But as we've seen, these kind of temperatures aren't for the faint-hearted. Luckily, Rich has something else up his sleeve. It's his pride and joy, the counter-rotating ring receiver reactor recuperator, mercifully the CR5 for short. A contraption that makes the raw ingredients for petrol at relatively low temperatures. The only downside is it can't be used to cook the sausages.
Wow. It's a counter-rotating ring receiver reactor and recuperation. Where is it? Is that it?
That would be it. Yep.
This is going to solve the world's energy problem.
Well, we hope so.
As a way of putting a very sort of positive and contemporary spin on this, does this machine mean I can continue to drive my old Porsche 911 around with a clear conscience?
That's exactly the idea.
That's what we want to do.
So this machine means a Porsche 911 runs on sunshine?
Yes.
If we can help you have a guilt-free conscience, we're happy to do that.
I'll have one. It's brilliant.
But before I hand over my credit card, I want to make sure that it really will make enough fuel for me to run my car.
Now, I do know what this is, because this is a parabolic mirror. When your final CR5 machine is fitted on there,
right,
how much would this produce in 24 hours, say?
Well, the ultimate CR5, when it's developed, would fit there, and on this this dish would produce 2 to 3 gallons of petrol per day.
Per day?
Per day.
So one of these in my garden, if I lived here, would easily fuel my 911.
Easily.
And probably a couple of other things as well.
That's correct.
I know they're a long way from making the fuel for my old car, but these blokes say, and I know they're a bit mad and living in the middle of a desert, but they do say that in the future I'll be filling up my car with petrol they have made from thin air. And if I could just add a personal note, I can't wait. To put my big ideas to the test, or learn more about Open University programmes on the BBC, log on to open2.net.